He's too weak to ever kick me out. That's what my niece said in the video my uncle sent me, laughing about it, calling me a clown. I'm Robert, 35, been working as an electrician in Jacksonville, Florida for 12 years. Built a decent life for myself. Own a small house with a guest unit out back that I renovated myself. 3 years ago, my niece Samantha moved into that guest house. She was 22 then, fresh out of college with a communications degree and no job prospects. My sister had died when Samantha was 16, and my Uncle Kevin raised her alone. Good man, but he spoiled her rotten. When she needed a place to stay temporarily, I said yes. Family helps family. The temporary arrangement became permanent real quick. First month she promised to pay rent once she found work. Second month, same story. By the 6th month I stopped asking. Figured she was struggling, trying to get her feet under her. I covered her utilities, bought groceries for both of us, even helped with her car insurance when she claimed she was broke. 3 years. 3 years of watching her come and go at all hours, bringing friends over for loud parties, treating my property like her personal playground. She never once offered to help with yard work or basic maintenance. When I asked her to keep the music down, she'd roll her eyes and say, "It's not that loud, Uncle Rob." Uncle Rob. Like I was some pushover relative instead of the man letting her live rent-free in a place worth $800 a month. The video came last Tuesday night. My Uncle Kevin forwarded it without any message, just the clip. Samantha was at some bar with her friends, obviously drunk, bragging about how she had me wrapped around her finger. "He's such a clown," she said, laughing. "Played him like a fool. He's too weak to ever kick me out. Free rent, free food, free everything. He won't do anything about it." Her friends were laughing too. One of them said, "You're lucky you found such a sucker." Samantha raised her drink. "To Uncle Rob, the biggest pushover in Florida." I watched that video 3 times. Didn't get angry. Didn't throw my phone. Just sat there in my kitchen, really understanding what I'd been dealing with for the first time. The disrespect wasn't new. The taking advantage wasn't new. But seeing it laid out so clearly, hearing her mock me to strangers, that was different. I'd been played all right, but not the way she thought. I should have seen it coming years earlier. My sister Claire had always worried about Samantha's entitled attitude, even before the cancer took her. "That girl expects the world to hand her everything," Claire told me during one of her treatments. "Kevin gives her whatever she wants. Someone needs to teach her about consequences." I promised Claire I'd look out for Samantha if anything happened. Seemed like the right thing to do when a dying woman asks you to help raise her daughter. But looking out for someone doesn't mean enabling them. After Claire died, Kevin threw himself into work and guilt. Anytime Samantha wanted something, he'd buy it. New car at 17, college paid in full, spring break trips to Miami. She learned early that tears and manipulation got results. When she graduated college with no real skills and no work ethic, Kevin was relieved when I offered the guest house. "Just until she finds her direction," he said. "She's been through so much." Everyone had been through something. I'd lost my sister too, but I still showed up to work every day, paid my bills, maintained my property. Samantha acted like grief was a permanent excuse for irresponsibility. The warning signs were there from the beginning. She never cleaned up after herself, left dishes in the sink for days, used my laundry room without asking, leaving her clothes in the machines for hours. When I mentioned these things, she'd get defensive or change the subject. 6 months in, I found out she'd been telling people she was house-sitting for me, like she was doing me a favor. A year in, she started charging her friends to park in my driveway during parties. When I confronted her about it, she said, "I thought you wouldn't mind. It's not like you use all that space." The breaking point should have been when she brought a guy home and they used my hot tub without permission, leaving it filthy with empty beer bottles floating in the water. Instead, I cleaned it up and installed a lock. She called me paranoid. Kevin would check in occasionally asking how she was doing. I always said fine. Didn't want to burden him with complaints about his daughter. Besides, what was I supposed to say? That his precious girl was a lazy, manipulative freeloader? He'd probably blame me for not setting boundaries. The truth was, I hadn't set boundaries. I'd been too nice, too accommodating, too worried about honoring my promise to Claire. Samantha had learned to read me perfectly. She knew exactly how far to push before backing off, how to make me feel guilty for asking her to contribute, how to play the grieving orphan card whenever I got frustrated. She was right about one thing. I had been too weak to kick her out. But that was about to change. I didn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about the video, about her friends laughing at me, about 3 years of being taken for granted. By morning, something had shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by something colder and more focused. I made coffee and sat on my back porch, looking at the guest house. Samantha's car was there, same beat-up Honda I'd helped her fix multiple times. Lights were still on inside. She never bothered turning them off. Why would she? She didn't pay the electric bill. For the first time in years, I saw the situation clearly. This wasn't about family loyalty anymore. This wasn't about keeping a promise to my dead sister. This was about a grown woman who had chosen to mock and exploit the person helping her, and who felt so secure in that exploitation that she bragged about it publicly. The guest house was legally a separate rental unit. I'd gotten the proper permits when I converted it, set up separate utilities, made sure everything was code compliant. That meant tenant-landlord laws applied, even without a formal lease. Florida statute was clear about month-to-month tenancies and eviction procedures. I'd been too nice to enforce any rules, but the law was still there. Around 10 a.m., Samantha emerged from the guest house in her pajamas to get coffee from my kitchen. She did this every morning, treating my house like an extension of hers. Today, I watched her through the window, noting how comfortable she looked, how entitled to everything I'd provided. "Morning, Uncle Rob," she said, patting around my kitchen in bare feet. "We're out of that good coffee, the expensive stuff." "I'll pick some up," I said. She grabbed a muffin from the counter, one I'd bought specifically for my own breakfast. "Thanks." "Oh, and my friend Maya might crash here tonight. She's having drama with her roommate." "Sure," I said. Samantha looked surprised. Usually I asked questions about overnight guests, tried to set some kind of limits. Today I just nodded and smiled. "Cool, you're the best." She headed back toward the guest house, muffin in hand, already scrolling through her phone. I waited until she was inside, then made a call to a real estate attorney my coworker had recommended. Explained the situation, asked about my options. The lawyer was straightforward. Since there was no written lease, state law treated it as a month-to-month tenancy. I could terminate it with proper notice, as long as I followed the correct procedures. "How much notice?" I asked. 15 days minimum for month-to-month. But I'd recommend 30 to avoid any complications. 30 days. I could manage 30 more days of her smugness, her entitlement, her complete lack of gratitude, especially knowing what was coming. "Send me the paperwork," I said. That afternoon I acted completely normal, bought the expensive coffee she wanted, smiled when she introduced Maya as her overnight guest, even helped them carrying groceries I'd paid for. But the papers were already being prepared. 3 days later, the eviction notice arrived by certified mail. I'd also paid for personal service, so a process server would deliver a copy directly to Samantha if she didn't sign for the certified letter. Either way, she'd get it. I was at work when it happened, running electrical for a new office building in downtown Jacksonville. My phone rang around noon. "What the hell is this?" Samantha's voice was shrill, panicked. "Some legal notice saying I have to move out?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly, securing a conduit to the wall. "What does it say?" "It says I have 30 days to vacate the premises. It says I'm a month-to-month tenant and you're terminating the tenancy." "Uncle Rob, what is this?" "Sounds like an eviction notice." "But why? I didn't do anything wrong. I've been a perfect tenant." Perfect tenant. The woman who hadn't paid a dime in rent for 3 years, who threw parties without permission, who called me a clown behind my back, thought she was perfect. Samantha, you can contest it if you think it's invalid. The notice explains your rights. Contest it? I shouldn't have to contest anything. Just tear this up and we'll pretend it never happened. I can't do that. Silence. Then her voice changed, became smaller, more manipulative. Uncle Rob, I don't understand. Did I do something to upset you? Because if I did, we can talk about it. We're family. Family. Now she wanted to play the family card. The notice stands, I said. You have 30 days. She hung up. Within an hour, my Uncle Kevin called. Rob, what's going on? Samantha is crying, saying you're kicking her out of nowhere. She says she doesn't understand what she did wrong. I'd been expecting this call. Kevin always believed whatever story Samantha told him, always took her side in any conflict. This time wouldn't be different. She needs to find her own place, Kevin. She's 25 years old. But she's been there for years. Why suddenly now? Did something happen? I could have told him about the video. Could have explained how his daughter had been mocking me to strangers, bragging about manipulating me. But Kevin would either make excuses for her or get defensive about his parenting. Neither conversation would help. It's time, I said simply. Rob, she doesn't have anywhere to go. Her job barely pays enough for a studio apartment. Can't you work something out? Maybe she could start paying some rent? Too little, too late. She'd had 3 years to get a better job, to contribute something, to show basic respect. Instead, she'd chosen to laugh about how weak I was. The decision's made, Kevin. This isn't like you. You've always been reasonable, always willing to help family. What's really going on? What was really going on was that I'd finally stopped being a pushover. But Kevin wouldn't understand that. In his mind, I was supposed to be endlessly accommodating, perpetually available to solve his daughter's problems. I'm sorry you're upset, I said. But this is my property, and I have the right to decide who lives on it. Kevin's voice hardened. Fine. But don't expect Samantha to forgive you for this. And don't expect me to either. After everything we've been through as a family, after losing Claire, I thought we could count on you. The guilt trip. I'd been expecting that too. Kevin was almost as good at manipulation as his daughter. I understand you're disappointed, I said. Disappointed? I'm disgusted. Claire would be ashamed of how you're treating her daughter. That hit harder than I'd expected, but I knew Claire would actually be proud of me for finally setting boundaries. She'd been worried about Samantha's entitlement long before she died. Goodbye, Kevin. I hung up and went back to work. By evening, I had 6 missed calls from Samantha and 4 from Kevin. I didn't return any of them. The battle lines were drawn. Family had chosen sides, and I was alone. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself instead of being walked over. 27 days to go. The harassment escalated over the next week. Samantha tried everything. Tears, anger, bargaining, threats. She left notes on my door explaining how unfair I was being. She called my work, trying to get me to answer her calls. She even showed up at my job site one afternoon making a scene in front of my coworkers. Please, Uncle Rob, she begged, standing next to my work truck in her pajama pants and flip-flops. I'll pay rent. I'll help around the house. I'll do whatever you want. My crew was watching, pretending to work while listening to every word. I felt embarrassed for both of us. Samantha, you need to leave. This is my workplace. Not until you listen to me. I've been calling for days and you won't answer. Because there's nothing to discuss. You have 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live. Where am I supposed to go? Do you know how expensive rent is right now? I can't afford a decent place on what I make. What she made was actually decent money for someone with her lack of skills. She worked part-time at a marketing agency, doing social media for local businesses. Could easily afford a studio apartment if she'd been saving instead of spending her money on clothes, restaurants, and party supplies. That's not my problem anymore. Her face changed then, the mask of desperation falling away. You know what? Fine. But you're making a huge mistake. When people find out how you treated family, how you threw out your own niece after she lost her mother, they're going to see what kind of person you really are. There it was. The threat to damage my reputation, to spin herself as the victim of a heartless uncle. I'd been wondering when she'd get to that. Good luck with that, I said, and climbed into my truck. She was still standing there when I drove away, shouting something I couldn't hear through the closed windows. That night, I found out exactly how she planned to play the victim card. My neighbor Janet knocked on my door around 8 p.m. Rob, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay with Samantha? She came by earlier crying, saying you were forcing her out because you needed the money. Interesting spin. Samantha was telling people I was evicting her for financial reasons, not because of her behavior. Made me look greedy instead of fed up. She needs to find her own place, I said simply. Oh, I understand completely. I just felt bad for her. She seemed so upset, so confused about why this was happening. She said you two had never had any problems before. Never had problems. The rewriting of history had begun. In Samantha's version, we'd been getting along perfectly until I suddenly decided to throw her out for no reason. She'll be fine, I said. She's a grown woman. Janet nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Whatever story Samantha had told her was more compelling than my brief responses. Over the next few days, I noticed other neighbors looking at me differently. A few people who usually waved when they saw me working in the yard suddenly found other things to focus on. Word was spreading through the neighborhood that I was heartlessly evicting my orphaned niece. I could have defended myself, could have explained the real situation. But that would mean sharing family business with neighbors, revealing how Samantha had been taking advantage of me for years. It would make me look like someone who couldn't handle his own family problems. So I stayed quiet and let people think what they wanted to think. Samantha was playing this exactly like I'd expected. The victim card, the reputation attack, the public sympathy campaign. She was good at manipulation, I'd give her that. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She thought I cared more about what other people thought than about my own self-respect. With 2 weeks left on the notice, Samantha made her final desperate play. She called my work on a Thursday morning, claiming it was a family emergency. When my foreman handed me the phone, she was sobbing. Uncle Rob, I need to tell you something. I found out why Dad sent you that video. I'd wondered when she'd figure out that the video was what triggered everything. Took her longer than I'd expected. What video? I said. Don't lie to me. I know Dad sent you the video of me at Marley's bar, but you don't understand the context. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about some guy who's been bothering me at work. Creative. She was trying to reframe the entire conversation, pretend it had been about someone else. Problem was, I'd watched that video carefully. She'd specifically mentioned free rent, free food, and not being able to get kicked out. No workplace harassment story could explain those details. Samantha, I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't make me do this the hard way, she said, her voice shifting from pleading to threatening. I really don't want to have to file a complaint. What kind of complaint? A wrongful eviction suit. I talked to a lawyer yesterday. He said I might have grounds since there was never a written lease agreement and you're retaliating against me for personal reasons. I'd been expecting this too. Desperation makes people reach for whatever weapons they can find, even legal ones they don't understand. You should definitely follow your lawyer's advice, I said. He also said that since I've been living there for over 3 years, I might have established tenant rights that go beyond a normal rental agreement. Especially since I never paid rent and you never asked for any until now. Actually, she was sort of right about that. Long-term occupancy without formal agreements could create complications. But she was also wrong about one crucial detail. Did you tell your lawyer that you never paid rent? Of course. That's the whole point. You can't suddenly demand payment after 3 years of accepting nothing. Interesting. What else did you tell him? that you're retaliating against me because of some personal grudge, that you've never had any complaints about my tenancy before, that this came out of nowhere. She just admitted to lying to her attorney. If she took this to court, I'd have evidence of her dishonesty, plus the video showing her real attitude toward our arrangement. Well, you should definitely file that lawsuit, I said. I'm sure your lawyer will represent you for free while you look for a new place to live. Rob, please. I'm trying to be reasonable here. Can't we work something out? What if I pay you back rent for the last few months and start contributing going forward? Back to bargaining. The lawsuit threat had been a bluff, and we both knew it. The notice stands. Fine. But when this destroys our family relationships, when Dad never speaks to you again, when everyone knows what kind of person you really are, remember that you chose this. I'll remember, I said, and hung up. That afternoon I drove by the guest house and saw boxes stacked by the door. She was finally packing. Either she'd realized the legal threats were empty, or she'd figured out that I wasn't going to back down no matter what pressure she applied. Either way, the countdown was working. 10 more days and she'd be gone. I felt lighter than I had in years. Moving day arrived on a Saturday. I watched from my kitchen window as Samantha loaded boxes into her Honda, making multiple trips between the guest house and her car. She'd found a studio apartment across town, probably costing her most of her monthly income. Kevin showed up around noon in his pickup truck to help with the larger items. He didn't knock on my door, didn't wave, didn't acknowledge my existence, just focused on getting his daughter moved out as quickly as possible. I could have gone outside, could have tried to smooth things over, could have offered to help load the truck. Instead, I stayed inside and watched them struggle with her dresser and mattress. Let them figure it out. Around 3 p.m. there was a knock on my door. Samantha stood there alone, holding a single key. "Here's your key back," she said, not making eye contact. "Thank you. I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted." I looked at her for a moment, this 25-year-old woman who'd spent 3 years treating me like a fool, who'd mocked me to strangers, who'd threatened me with lawsuits when she didn't get her way. "I got my property back," I said. "That's all I wanted. I never meant for things to get this bad between us." "Yes, you did. You meant for me to keep being a pushover indefinitely." She flinched like I'd slapped her, maybe because it was the first completely honest thing I'd said to her in months. "I was grateful for everything you did. I know I didn't always show it, but I was grateful." "No, you weren't. You were entitled." Her face crumpled. For a second, she looked like the scared kid she'd been when her mother died. Then the moment passed and she was just another adult who'd made bad choices and didn't want to face the consequences. "I hope you can live with yourself," she said. "I'm sleeping better than I have in years." She turned and walked away without another word. Kevin was waiting by his truck, engine running. Neither of them looked back as they drove off. I stood in my doorway for a minute looking at the empty guest house. Then I went inside and opened a beer. The guest house sat empty for 2 months while I decided what to do with it. Part of me wanted to rent it out properly this time, with a lease agreement and security deposit and background checks. But mostly I just enjoyed having my property to myself again. No more loud music at midnight. No more strangers parking in my driveway. No more dirty dishes appearing in my sink. No more entitled attitude from someone who should have been grateful. Kevin never called. The family rupture was complete, exactly as Samantha had predicted. My other relatives heard some version of the story that painted me as the villain, and most of them chose to believe it, rather than ask for my perspective. I was fine with that. Anyone who thought I was wrong for setting boundaries wasn't someone I needed in my life anyway. Some neighbors still gave me cold looks, but most people moved on to newer gossip. My reputation survived the temporary damage. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Samantha was struggling with her studio apartment, complaining about the cost and the size and the lack of amenities. Apparently, she'd expected to find something comparable to my guest house for the same price she'd been paying me, which was nothing. A few months later, my Uncle Kevin called. Not to apologize, but to ask if I'd consider letting Samantha move back in temporarily while she looked for something better. No, I said. She's learned her lesson, Rob. She appreciates what you did for her now. Good for her. Family should help family. Family should respect family. He hung up without saying goodbye. That fall, I rented the guest house to a young teacher for $700 a month plus utilities. She paid on time, kept the place clean, and thanked me every time she saw me. The difference was remarkable. Sometimes the best revenge is just refusing to be played anymore.